we are closer to be vanished in the history rather than any time else, unfortunately. And this is something the Islamic Republic has done to our homeland, unfortunately.
Today on Eye for Iran, 3 stories shaping the lives of Iranians at home and abroad. Iran has gone from drought to scenes of flooding across the country. What's driving these extremes, and why flooding doesn't solve the water crisis? We'll be joined by Roozbeh Eskandari, an environmental researcher and hydraulic structures expert. In the United States, renewed travel bans and immigration restrictions are raising urgent questions for Iranians and their families. What do these rules actually mean in practice? Who is affected, and what should people be doing right now? We'll break it down with Ali Rahnama, an Iranian-American immigration attorney.
The U.S. government has worked hand in glove with the Iranian regime.
And inside Iran, arrests continue. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi and other activists have been detained following a memorial ceremony for a lawyer who died under disputed circumstances. We'll be speaking with Azadeh Afsahi, an Iranian-American psychotherapist who works with political prisoners and is in direct contact with the families of those arrested.
But the actuality is the same regime, is the same law, and same treatment that they have been for the past 46 years.
I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Iran has gone from drought to scenes of flooding across the country. How did this happen, and why now? And what does it actually mean for Iran's water crisis? To help us make sense of all of this, we're joined by Roozbeh Eskandari, an environmental researcher and hydraulic structure expert. Roozbeh, welcome to Eye for Iran.
Hi, Negarjan. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be in your show.
Likewise, let's start with the big question. How does a country go from prolonged drought to widespread flooding? What's happening in Iran that allows these two extremes to exist at the same time?
Yeah, things are expected from a so-called Islamic government who doesn't know anything about what we call sustainable development. I'm going to wrap it up in one word: bad governance. So when we're talking about government, means the people who needs to plan, the people who needs to do projection, they need to know what's going around them. But the thing is, this government has proven itself as some sort of entity who doesn't really care about the environment. And then we can see the consequences, as you have truly mentioned, the drought, the water bankruptcy, and then the potential danger of having floods all around the country.
But and from an environmental standpoint, how does that happen science-wise?
Well, if you want to know the root causes of this so-called danger, you need to come back to the way they have developed the cities, like the urban planning, and also the rural ones. Climate change is not a root cause, but it can be considered as an intensifier. Definitely what we have here in the Middle East region is because of the climate change, because of the jet stream effects on precipitation or rainfall. And it's not just like the amount or the volume, it's also the pattern, which means we have fewer days to have rains. And then when we have it, then it's going to be kind of massive. And then another problem is the soil. Iran has one of the largest soil erosion index in the world.
What does that mean?
And it means that we are losing soil as time goes by. And then the soil, which used to be saturated, which used to absorb water, it acts like a kind of resistant, massive sort of soil which has no place. So the soil needs to be somehow shallow, and then all these voids inside the soil used to be filled with water back in the days. And then that's how we had the aquifers below the ground level. But because of all this compaction, all these access roads, all of that, the soil has lost the ability of absorbing the water. And then that's why when there is a rain, when it pours, it doesn't go under the ground. It stays on the surface. And then because of the slope and everything, it will be mixed with mud and clay and everything. And then we have this destructive flood in too many cities in Iran.
Wow. And so what does that mean for the people of Iran when they're slowly losing soil?
Well, the agriculture has been affected through these years. If you look at the numbers, you know what I'm saying. Kind of depletion of all these aquifers caused the problem. In Iran, we have more than 1 million deep wells, which somehow pumps and takes out of the water, which was supposed to be as some sort of a storage for the dry years like this year. Iran has been in a drought, kind of natural drought, for the last 5 years, and it's been the harshest drought in the history. But the thing is, the duty or the task of a governor is to project the situation and keep the water for these times. But the point is, we have too many dams. They're doing the like interbasin water transfer, desalination projects, taking water from one watershed and just bring it to another one, which is somehow a symbol of environmental injustice. Because when we're talking about the environmental law or environmental justice, we mean that everybody has the right to have access to the clean water, to good air, safe roads. In one word, decent life. And this is something that the Islamic Republic governments do not believe in.
But what about, you mentioned urban development and governance. So what is it about urban development in Iran that's leading to these types of conditions? What are they doing wrong here?
They do not comply with the patterns of sustainable development.
Hmm.
Urban development in Iran, vertically or horizontally, is not as per as water issue. So I would say water management is somehow missing. And the way that they expand the cities, then you will have too many residents. Most of them are the people who cannot afford being in expensive neighborhoods in a city like Tehran. And then if you consider Tehran as a template, we'll see the people of South, as we call them, Junub Shah, they will be more affected of the natural events like flood or pollution, which means that the environmental justice doesn't exist or has not been considered in planning. When we're talking about sustainable development, it has like 3 pillars: economical, environmental, and then social. But you see that if you do not consider this in your planning, when you want to expand cities because of the price or because of short time beneficial for the stakeholders, whoever it is, municipalities, cities, governors, IRGC, there are organizations who are more powerful than any environmental organization in Iran, and unfortunately, they have the upper hands.
And you talked about the economic disparities between the rich and the poor, between North and the South, and even within Tehran, between the northern Tehran, which is where the more affluent communities coexist. Do they develop those areas differently? Like, why is it that they're being spared in some ways from some of this?
Well, the thing is, if you're rich, then you can have some sort of safe house. If you're living in a rich neighborhood like Tajrish, for example, in Tehran, it's not just the topology which helps you. You're on top of the hill. You have a better management in your city regions because you pay more taxes, or let's say the powers to be, the rich families, the families who are close to the government are living in these neighborhoods. So they will prepare more facilities for them, including the EGO or the sewer collecting system. The thing is, when it pours, uh, uh, it's somehow okay and nice for the people who are living in the north of Tehran, but it turns into a disaster for the people who are living in the south, not just because of the slope of Tehran from north to south, but also because of the weak network of collecting water. And these people are the least for decision making or for or planning or anything, but they will be more affected than any other citizens in big cities like Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, and so on.
And when we see these images of flooding in across Iran, when people see floods, some people just naturally assume that this may help replenish the water resources. How does flooding affect the water crisis in Iran?
These floods could be used to feed the aquifers. You could have distributed them. There are ways, like watershed management, as we call it. So as a governor, as a decision maker, if you are ready, if you have been through all the data, which shows you that it's going to be like a heavy rain, then you can, well, before that, you can send alarms or warnings to the people. So they will be ready before the catastrophic situation starts, you know? But the thing is, anything that happens would be after catastrophe or crisis or disaster. So when we're talking about planning means preventing, but there's no such a thing in Iran. And the thing is, if people are well informed, then they know that if there is a potential danger of flood, what should they do? Or what sort of, cautions they need to consider. But the thing is, in Iran, we do not have crisis management. We have a management who is somehow criticized and wondering what to do. These all happens because of mismanagement and because of not considering very important document as land use planning, which needs to be done. But there's always problems in the way because of some organization, as I already mentioned, like IRGC or some ministries, that they somehow prevent of the execution of these documents or plans, and then the normal people, the ordinary people, needs to face the consequences.
And what do you say to people who, when we're reporting on the drought and then there's flooding and heavy rainfall, and some people online will comment and say, oh, well, that was just fake news. Iran was supposed to run out of water in 2 weeks, et cetera, et cetera. What do you say to people like that, given your expertise?
I would say we are one step closer to the territorial collapse. It's not a joke. Sometimes people believe that the environmental issues are somehow fantasy. Everybody remembers like Greenpeace movement or stuff like that. But the reality is, when we're talking about environment, means the airs, the environment that we are all living in. And we need to save the airs so the airs will save us. Uh, the thing is, anybody who questions the mismanagement, anybody who wonders that everything happened because of climate change, that's a hoax. Uh, Climate change cannot be the root cause of anything. As I said, it can alter or intensify the effects of events. But if you use the experts, if you hire a scientist, and if you have some sort of planning, you won't be shocked or surprised when a heavy rain comes or, things like that. But the thing is, the Islamic Republic governors learned something very well. Anytime that something happens due to their mismanagement, they blame climate change. Iran is pretty close to what we call it 0 day for the big cities like Tehran. They need to be evacuated if the current situation goes on. And then we are facing something.
But how? It's 18 million people, Greater Tehran. How?
Well, when there is no water, you can't live. This as simple as that. You need to somehow transport people outside of Tehran, which is not possible. I understand that this is not an ordinary task to be done, but we had cities in the history of the world that has been abandoned or condemned because of water scarcity or water shortage. And as I said, we are in water bankruptcy process. The sooner we know the fact, the truth, the better for everybody. So you will have a good understanding of what is going around you, and you cannot face the truth. You cannot resist the nature. And this is something that Islamic Republic has been doing for almost half a century. And now the people of Iran, they're facing the consequences and the results of mismanagement of this so-called government.
And this day zero that you mentioned, how likely is this in your view? Like you said, given the facts.
Well, in big cities like Tehran, we almost had it. They need to remember that the government, they had to bring water like with tankers. But then it's a kind of like hard controlling of the water consumption, as they call it, jirabandi. So that would be a short-term solution. But if you see the big picture, you need to strengthen your infrastructures. You need to decrease the consumption of water. Iran is almost 3 times more when it comes to consumption of water. Iran is using almost 90% of its water in agriculture, and then all these products are less than 4% of Iran's GDP, which means they couldn't even turn this damage to environment to the economy. And that would be another a big issue in the future for the farmers, for the people who their lives is somehow depending on the ground. When the land is dry, when you see the numbers of land subsidence or soil erosion or water scarcity, you know that we are pretty close to a land breakdown, and then there will be more consequences as local like immigrations and then settling down around the big cities because of the economical situation. And then you know that it may turn into a revolt or crisis that even this dictatorship would not be able to control.
Wow. And I mean, and you mentioned territorial collapse. That's a very powerful statement. Can you elaborate on that, on what that means for the future, near future of Iran and this shift now from drought to flooding? What does that signal?
This sends a signal that we are pretty close to what we call civil war. Uh, it happened in Syria, and the probability for having this in Iran is pretty much, to be honest with you. Look what happened between 2 regions of Isfahan and Yazd, or all these water tensions in Khuzestan, in Charmal and Bakhtiyari. So it means that we are getting close to that point, which I call it point of no return, because it could divide people. It could divide different races. It could divide different regions.
Yeah.
Because when you steal money from one watershed and you transfer it to somewhere else, then both parties will be affected in a long-term consideration or assessment. But this is something that government doesn't believe. I'm quite sure they know what they're doing, but they see Iran's natural resources as some sort of opportunity for their own beneficial purposes. And if you go through water mafia or, IRGC contractors or companies, then you will see most of these money just goes outside to be used in proxy forces use. And this is something that is happening in Iran. It really breaks my heart to talk about all this crisis and disastrous situation. But I would say raising awareness amongst Iranians would be the only thing that people like me are able to do.
And that's a really interesting point that you made. I know that, for example, in Esfahan, with there being no water in the Zayanda route, you do hear from locals there saying things like, "Oh, well, so and so from the government lives in Yas, so they're pulling all the water down there," and it creates then conflict between different regions. That's a very good point that I didn't consider. Kind of the more longer term impacts and how, with a lack of resources, that can cause like a resource civil war, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, neighbors or even families, they became enemies when it comes to survival.
Yeah.
And water is something about surviving. It's not about friendship. It's not about relationship. Uh, Without water, without air, you cannot live. As simple as that. Look what happened in Khuzestan. Between Karun 2 and Karun 3 dams, like the situation is similar to what it is in desert, right? There is no water. The soil is salty. The people cannot breathe. Look at the air pollution. So all the standards that need to be considered to have a healthy life, a decent life, uh, have been somehow eliminated from nation, from people of Iran. And as I said, for now, it may sound calm, but I would call it calm before a storm because uh, when the day comes that there is no drop of water in wells and you will see cracks in the soil and you will see that the land subsidence is all over the place. Even now, 50% of Iran's population are living in the places that the risk of land subsidence is high. And that's why I'm talking about territorial collapse or breakdown. And the thing is, the governors who need to plan, who need to remedy this situation, they don't care about these items, unfortunately. Uh, Even if they want to continue uh, ruling over the people, they need to keep people alive. But apparently, they don't care about their environmental justice or they don't care about their decent lives as they do not care about their economical situation.
And so it seems like this is a way bigger threat than what we hear of, from America or Israel or the whole nuclear file that gets a lot of attention in the media.
That's right. The excuse of expending so much money on the nuclear program was to generate electricity, right? Uh, what is the result of all these challenges and fights and problems? It's Boucher power generation who only generates less than 1% of what we need in our electrical network. So everything this government says is somehow sham, fake news. Uh, they want to deviate like the ideas of the people, not just in Iran, for the whole world. But I would say the Iranians are smart now. They know what this government has done to their land, to their motherland, to Iran. And Iran is the first established country in the world. And we've been there for more than 3,000 years. But I would say we are closer to be vanished in the history rather than any time else, unfortunately. And this is something the Islamic Republic has done to our homeland, unfortunately.
Wow. And just to conclude, for people who are seeing this flooding and this rainfall, it's going to do little to nothing to help with the drought, is what it seems like.
No, if you do not crack the plans, if you do not know how to distribute the flood, if you are not prepared or ready how to treat with the floods, there will be damages, not use. For an intellectual sophisticated government, yes. You can expect this to be used for feeding or filling the aquifers or the groundwater resources, but not with this government, not with these policies that has taken Iran into, as I call it, a point of no return, unfortunately, for the land and for the people, both at the same time.
Point of no return. Thank you so much. That's Roozbeh Eskandari. That was a very enlightening and very informative and educational segment. I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine, Negarjan.
Since President Donald Trump's first administration, most notably with the so-called Muslim ban, people of Iranian origin have faced heightened scrutiny in the United States. Now, following the killing of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. last month by an Afghan migrant, immigration has once again moved to the center of the political debate. President Trump says he is cracking down on immigration in the name of national security with a renewed focus on Muslim-majority countries. Now, the administration has paused immigration applications from more than a dozen countries that it deems to be high risk, halted the processing of many asylum seekers, and just this week expanded the travel ban. So what does this actually mean if you're an Iranian living in the United States or if someone you love is? To help us separate fact from fear, we're joined by Ali Rahnama. He's an Iranian-American attorney with the Iranian-American Legal Defense Fund. He's the executive director. Thank you for being here, Ali.
Thanks, Negarjan. I'm glad to be here.
Now, a lot of people are anxious and are looking for clarity, of course. So let's make this as practical and as informative as possible. Ali, as an Iranian-American attorney, you're getting obviously a firsthand look of what's happening. It's been nearly a month since this travel ban or, the implementation came into effect from President Donald Trump. Let's start with the deportations. What are you seeing right now? And can you share some examples from clients that you are representing?
So to the travel ban, the new travel ban has been into effect since early summer. What has changed in the past almost a month is that the application processing for other types of immigration cases have been halted as well. Now, I wanted to add this. You started by saying that after the horrific incident in Washington, D.C., that an Afghan citizen killed 2 members of the National Guard, this new policy went into effect. I have to remind people that this is not new. Even 4 weeks before this incident, New York Times reported that the Department of Homeland Security has this policy on mind to implement very soon. Now, it happened that this horrific event happened right after this news, and they used that as a bait to say this was the reason. We have to understand this. This was not the reason or even a catalyzer of what this new policy, why this new policy went into effect. We have been working on this for a long time. They have talked about it. They have put it on paper, and even inside the Department of Homeland Security, getting ready to push this out.
Okay, so it's set it in the motion.
It has been in motion. It has always been the plan to do this. Now, what it is that the new policy that went into effect last month do. Now, before this, we had a travel ban, which meant that people outside of the United States could not come, of Iranian descent, could not come to the U.S. That was the travel ban. What has happened last month, from the last month policy, is that the people who are inside the country who have applications pending, for example, if they have applied for green cards, or if they have a green card, they have applied for citizenship, or if they are asylum seekers, they apply for asylum cases, or if they have applied for work permits, those applications are going to be halted now. Well, they said for a short period of time, and President Trump came out and said that temporary pause is going to be forever.
Wow. So if you are, like you said, an Iranian living in the United States, you're going through obviously all the legal means. For people who have work visas, who have then applied for green cards, what is happening to them? You mentioned that there was a pause. But if they already have the visa, does that mean they just can't renew it? Or if they're in the process of getting the green card, how does it impact them? Does one cancel each other out?
It's a very distinguished set of facts depending on each case. So we can't just generally talk about everyone. But the general idea is if you are on a visa, you probably wouldn't be able to renew that visa, which that simply means that you have to leave the country. If you applied for green card, that application is paused. There are ways to apply for green card, and while you're waiting for your application, your status in the United States is going to be still valid, so you could stay, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get your green card anytime soon. Now, going back to the word pause, the reason they put in place the word pause in that policy is that if they didn't, it would probably be that policy would be called unconstitutional based on the federal regulations under APA and also INA, which is the Immigration Nationalization Act. Now, that pause could be prolonged by the administration. The question among lawyers is, how long is a pause, is a reasonable pause, right? So that's where the issue comes in. But I wanted to pivot this and this conversation towards what we're seeing, what's happening to the most vulnerable, which is the asylum seekers who have ran away from the Islamic Republic under dire circumstances, got into the United States, and legally applying for asylum and waiting for their cases. I wanted to talk about that and what the due process has meant for them, what the conditions they are under in detention, and at the end of, and also how the U.S. government has been treating them.
So what are you saying?
So I had the opportunity to go to many of these detention facilities and observe firsthand, talk to these Iranian asylum seekers. There are three things that are very, very worrying. In terms of the most, highlighted issue here is that the U.S. government has worked hand in glove with the Iranian regime, Islamic Republic, to allow the director of the intersection in Washington, D.C., which is basically the embassy of the Iranian regime here, to go and meet with these people in detention. So they bring out these asylum seekers and say, you have visits. They bring them out. Suddenly there is someone who they explained as, oh my God, how could a Sepai come in into these detentions seeing me? This is their first reaction.
And for people who don't know, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, how we say it in Farsi.
So the manner of that person, the style of the clothes, all reminded them of the IRGC members inside Iran, right? So they're faced with this person. This person starts talking to them. The first thing he tells them is, you would not have an issue going back to Iran unless you have a political case. Now, political case, which is why they have applied for asylum, is a term of art in Farsi, which includes all types of issues with the Islamic Republic, from actually political cases, meaning that political dissidents, but also it could mean people who have cases of apostasy or change of religion. It could mean anything relevant to the Sharia law.
Their sexuality.
That's sexuality, like members of the LGBTQ community. That's a term of arts they use in Farsi, which doesn't directly maybe translate in English. Now, he goes, if you don't have any case on that, if you have any political case, you should be safe going back. And also this person had specific information about cases of these asylum seekers, meaning that he knew the basis of their asylum cases and the details of it. And the issue with that is that this is flat out illegal under the Immigration Nationality Act, which is a federal law, but also a horrible way of dealing with asylum seekers who ran away from a government by the U.S. government. Now, another thing he has said is that the U.S. government confers with us before putting you on a plane, meaning that we have the right of choice to choose who's going to be on that flight if we are given that opportunity. And this just tells us that the asylum seekers here are faced not only with a very hostile U.S. government who doesn't care about due process, but also a U.S. government for the first time is working with the Iranian regime against its asylum seekers. We have never seen that. The Iranian regime never agreed on anything with the American government. This is the first time they're agreeing on something, and that's against the Iranian people and Iranian dissidents, especially the political and religious dissidents.
And has anyone that you represented, have they been deported?
Well, they were on deportation list for December 7th. We filed a claim with the UN Commission on Torture, and they were not put on that flight. So no, they were not sent back, and that was a small win we were looking for, so we could get these people to be represented directly and sufficiently in U.S. courts, which is my second point. The due process we're seeing that's used against these people is basically either non-existent or something that we could not call real due process under the American legal jurisprudence. What we're seeing is that we are seeing hostile judges and prosecutors, basically, if I wanted to translate it in lay terms, by the Department of Homeland Security, which is their attorneys representing the government. Things that we're hearing, I will give you some examples. One of the examples is that when they go and tell, for example, the judge or the Department of Homeland Security attorney that the lebos shakhsis, which basically means plainclothes members of the Iranian security apparatus, has attacked me or thrown me in a police van and took me away, they have been asked this question: how do you know they're from the Iranian government? This has never been a question on the mind of the Department of Homeland Security attorneys or the immigration judges before this administration came into power. We already knew what that meant, right? If you, after Mahsa Amini revolution, you're on the streets, you're getting beaten up, you have the marks to show that, your hands were hit, your body was hit, and your question on the mind of the person is the person who hit you was on a motorcycle in plain clothes. That can't be whether they were part of the Iranian government. We already know they were part of the Iranian government. So it's a hostility that comes into the due process that's at question. Another thing is the pressures that these asylum seekers feel in these facilities. No one in these facilities getting positive reaction from the immigration courts as they see it. There are some people who are getting, but the number are so small that the feeling in these facilities that this is the end of the world, you are not going to see real due process. Another example of that would be for the Iranian asylum seekers who told the judge that I have already been convicted to go to prison. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 11 years in prison in Iran. And the response from the judge was, all right, so you can go back to Iran, go to prison, and come out, and you're going to be fine as an Iranian citizen. The response from the Iranian asylum seeker is, well, I might get tortured. It's not like you go to prison and just live happily ever after. These are the places you get interrogated. There are additional charges that comes against you. And the judge says, I don't believe in every prison in Iran they torture people. So
really? Wow.
What we're seeing here is that the government has decided not to really hear people's cases, has decided, and I quote this, that if you walk into court, your fate is already decided. They're not there to listen to your case. And that's a big issue. Or another case in Georgia that really blew my mind, and I've been speaking about this, is one of these detainees reported that they have been surrounded by ICE officers to basically and physically threatened to put their fingerprint on their voluntary departure papers. And he also reported that in the same facility, there have been people who have reported being handcuffed from behind, and basically officers putting their fingers on these papers, fingerprinting, so they could say that they have voluntarily accepted to leave the country. What we're seeing here is something that every American would not believe. when I talk about this, which I have observed firsthand, and we have a declaration from these folks explaining these situations, no one would believe these things are happening in America. And that's where the concern is. The concern is not about the real deportations of people with high crimes or the people who have issues with their immigration status, they just want to be here, or even the people who came here for economic opportunity. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are real people with real fear of the Islamic Republic. I'll give you another example. A Christian convert who has been a Christian for years before living in Iran and got caught inviting others to Christianity, runs away and asks the judge. So one of the past very famous Iranian pastors, Iranian-American pastors in America, would be a witness to talk about the dangers. The judge has said, no, I don't need to hear those things, and denies the case. Another case is a member of LGBTQ community who has been repeatedly raped in Iran, comes here and gets denied. These are the type of people we're talking about here, not everybody. So this is not we are against just everything that this administration does. There might be some policies that everyone agrees to, but as Iranian Americans, we have to understand this, that if the regime has ruined our Iranian dignity around the world, we have the power, or we have to fight for it, at least in America, as Iranian Americans. If Iranians are showing up on the shores of America, asking for help against this regime, we have to show up. Similar way that our fellow Jewish Americans show up. If a Jewish American if a Jewish person shows up here, Jewish Americans are there to support. We have to be there to support our Iranian fellows as well.
No, it's a beautiful thing to see that your organization is doing such incredible work, and I've been following your work for a number of years, and very grateful for the work that you do, Ali.
Thank you very much.
And I wanted to also ask you about from obviously we've heard the cases of the most vulnerable people. There are some people that I know who are getting something called pending change of status applications, and who are receiving notices of intent to deny. What does that mean?
So there are the different types of cases here that we're dealing with. Now, there are cases of Iranians who have been in this country, either applying for permanent residency or applying for different types of visas, so they could stay here, work, or live long term. And what we're seeing is not only their cases are not being processed, some of these cases that have already been either approved or in the process of an approval are being revisited. And while being revisited, they're receiving letters of intent to be denied, denials, which basically means that they have tried to find an issue in their cases or reopened it. So they're asking for more clarification. But in some cases, no clarification. There are a few cases of Iranians who have been in their swearing-in ceremony for their citizenship, and they were taken out saying, no, you're not swearing in today. And that simply means their application was approved by the USCIS, which is the agency that approves these applications in America.
It takes a number of years, right? Like, it's not that it's, overnight.
And they have gone through
process.
Through the process, meaning that they have been interviewed. Usually they have gone through the security check, background checks. All of those things have happened to them, and they have been approved by the agency. Now they're being taken out. So your question is, what does this mean for the community? So the honest answer is not exactly known. But what we expect is, because they're trying to take away the ability of people to get their applications processed, they're basically forcing people to leave. Some of these applications are visa applications. The other types are, for example, renewal of work permits. If you are here even legally with status, if you don't have a work permit, then you can't live, right? So they're basically, the plan is to try to poke holes in all the applications that are in the process. If they cannot do that, try to see if they can force you to leave by making your life much harder. And that's the big idea before the next level of the plan, which probably is denaturalization. The idea is, he's been very clear, Mr. Trump and his administration. They do not want people who look like me and you in this country. And they're willing to create a level of propaganda that is not validated by statistics to get us out. And what is understandable is for non-Iranians, for example, to feel that way. What surprised me was a number of our fellow Iranian-Americans who would agree with these policies without knowing the facts. And what we are trying to do is to rebuild this community here in a way that understanding is back. That feeling that if I got in, I can help another Iranians to survive this situation as well. And that goes back to our identity. That goes back to our dignity in this country.
And what about, I'm also curious about dual nationals. So Iranians who are living in the United States who carry a Canadian passport, a UK passport, European passport, if they're in the United States on a work visa, like you said, and then it's up for renewal, does that mean that they will be denied the renewal eventually?
So the
Does that
policy
effectively
that
end immigration from people of that origin
if
eventually
you
in the
are
long term?
born in Iran, so for the first time, one of the first times in American history, what we're seeing here is they're not talking about only Iranian citizenship. What they're including in there is being born in Iran, meaning that if you're born in Iran, but you have a UK passport or a European or any other passport, that does not help you in general. Your cases are going to be the processing of your case is going to be paused. So they're not in this time. They're not outside of the sphere of the influence. No, they're going to be affected heavily.
Wow. So would they, I would assume then that they wouldn't be able to apply for their green cards, or if they are, they would just get that denial that we spoke of
Well,
because they were born in Iran.
the question of denial that you spoke of, we don't know yet if they're going to do mass denials on all cases, because we haven't observed it yet. The moment it starts rolling out, then we would know, because it's just very new. What's happening is a pause. Basically, your application is not being processed and just sitting in there, right? Now, for some people, that just basically means they're going to run out of time to be legally present in the U.S. That makes them,
Which puts them at risk, at high
at
risk.
risk. And that looks like denial, yes. For some people, while waiting, they could stay here legally on status. They cannot go out and come back in probably, but they could stay here in the U.S. legally. So the word denial might not exactly be the right word, but it would effectively feel like it.
So as a lawyer, just to conclude, what are you looking out for then in the coming, I mean, so much has happened just in the past month. What are you looking out for in the weeks and months ahead when it comes to this specific topic?
So the Iranian-American Legal Defense Fund was created to protect the Iranian-American community and also the Iranians who are in the United States. And we have tried to create an infrastructure that would have a rapid response capability and also long-term capability to, through impact litigation and other strategies, to push back on these policies. So what are we expecting in 2026 is something that we have never experienced before within the Iranian-American community, because not only the asylum seekers this time are going to be affected, not only the people who are outside of the United States are going to be affected, this time the people inside are going to be heavily affected, and who are here, with long-term plans, lives, their families have been here for a long time. And what we're expecting in 2026 is a huge number of cases where the families are going to be taken apart and torn apart, and also a huge number of cases of people who have worked their whole life to build another, to have another opportunity in America, being forced to leave America. And we have to deal with that. And that number is going to substantially increase. And we're trying to build infrastructure for it.
Well, again, thank you so much. That's Ali Rahnama joining us on Eye for Iran. And once again, many thanks for the incredible work that you and your team do.
Thanks for having me, Nigarjan.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nargis Mohammadi was reportedly taken to hospital emergency room twice after sustaining injuries inflicted by security forces during her arrest in Iran. Mohammadi was detained while attending a memorial ceremony for an Iranian human rights lawyer who died under disputed circumstances. Several other human rights activists were also arrested, including Puran Nazemi. Families say they have received little to no information about their whereabouts or their condition. Joining me now is Roozbeh Eskandari, a psychotherapist who works with political prisoners, as an activist also who was in direct contact with many of those who have been arrested. Roozbeh, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I recently spoke with your colleague and partner at the Iran House, Mashid Nazemi, about her sister Puran. She told me she was on a live video call and she showed me it, where the arrest unfolded before her eyes and she was able to hit the screen, record screen button. It was absolutely terrifying watching it in live action. Based on what you're hearing, what's the latest on all of these arrests and cases from that funeral ceremony?
Yeah, I think that's the scary part is that we haven't heard anything from any of them. Especially, I am in direct contact with Pura Nazemini. I've got to know her for the past 3 years, and she's a very close friend of mine. And what's scary is that we haven't heard anything from any one of them, and they're not allowed to have access to any of their lawyers. They can't make any phone calls. I think since Puran's arrest, there was only one phone call that was made to her family, and you could hear the guards just say that you're okay, otherwise we're gonna end the conversation. And I think the scary part is to be in the unknown and not knowing what's going to happen.
Wow, and several other people were arrested as well.
So many other people have been arrested. From my knowledge, is almost 40 people have been arrested. Some of them, like you mentioned, are more famous than others. But what we are scared of is that usually what they tend to do is that the people that we don't know their names, they tend to maybe get harsher treatment than the ones that are famous. But nevertheless, everybody are being brutally treated under the Islamic Republic, especially for what? They weren't doing anything. They were just attending a funeral and they were showing the respect to the family. And that's what's so aggravating for me watching this from a distance.
As a journalist covering Iran, there's this striking contradiction. Like, I'm encountering videos of, these incredible coffee shops and even bars. Obviously they're not legally serving alcohol, but I do see some alcohol is being served. Parties, street parties, outdoor concerts, marathons, you name it, people without the headscarf. And then on the other hand, I'm seeing these mass arrests, like you said, at a ceremony for a human rights lawyer who, again, the state says died from cardiac arrest, but friends and family are citing, surveillance footage that has been mishandled, blood on the scene, head trauma, all that kind of stuff. So how do you, I know that two things can be true at the same time. And I know that, both things can be true at once, but how do you account for the contradictions and this odd coexistence between these very different things that we're seeing in Iran right now?
Think what media in the West is trying to portray, that the Iranian women or people in Iran right now have more freedom that they do. But the actuality is the same regime, is the same law and same treatment that they have been for the past 46 years. Nothing in that sense has changed. Is the fact that people have changed in terms of they're not going to put up with it anymore. But we only see in the some pockets of Iran as we see women without hijab, but the laws are still the same. At school, little girls have to wear hijab, and that's very traumatic to their existence. At work, at bank, they can't even catch an Uber, we call it snap in Iran, without hijab. So when I see these footages coming from Iran, I want to, the heading can sometimes be misleading, because the heading should be that Iranian women are still risking their lives of being raped, killed, executed, but they're risking their lives for their freedom. And that should actually be the heading, because like you said, very suspicious circumstances for a human rights lawyer who was jailed for almost a year for defending freedom fighters, was died under these circumstances. Why would you want to remove the cameras? And if you have trauma to your head, or if you have a heart attack, there is no way you will be seeing blood. Clinically, that's impossible. So that raised the question that there is suspicious, and people are not going to stay silent anymore.
And speaking of resistance and bravery that you mentioned from the people of Iran, let's pivot to Iranian rapper Toomaj Salehi. You recently conducted a very powerful interview with him. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who Toomaj is, why he's so important, and what stood out at you during this interview?
Well, Toomaj is an Iranian rapper. It's also a humanitarian and activist. Through his songs, through his action, trying to put eyes on what's happening inside of Iran, the oppression under the regime. And he's been in solitary confinement over 9 months for standing behind his word, for standing behind Iranian women and men who are struggling right now inside of Iran. And I had the privilege to sit down with him, our conversation that we had, and he shared what happened inside those cells, the 9 months that he was held. And Toomaj, obviously, if you guys get a chance to watch this, we have a visitor. Sorry. Toomaj is very much, he's in terms of his mind, his body, very strong, in terms of very resilient, I would like to say. But despite that resilient, we can see as he's sharing how they were playing these psychological games to break him. And I think Toomaj is such an inspiration, and I think that's what regime wants to go after, these freedom fighters, because they are inspiring others to take action. And he's inspiring me every day to kind of do what I'm doing, because I live in a free world, and I have a freedom of speech. It would be a betrayal to the Iranian people if I don't stand behind them.
So actually, before we get to Toomaj, tell us what you do at Iran House.
So Iran House is a nonprofit organization. It's called Houses Inc. It's registered at Houses Inc. So what we do, we create healing homes around the world. We started with Iran House, obviously, because I'm Iranian, but we have also started Afghanistan House, and the next one is going to be Sudan House, as we provide 360-degree help. We have mental health services, we have medical services, and we have also legal services. As when you help that kind of population, you can't just have one slice of the pie. You have to help them throughout the whole 360.
That's amazing. And going back to Toomaj, what did he reveal to you that you want people to know? Because he really opened up to you a lot during that interview that you don't normally hear from, especially from Iranian men.
From Iranian men, and I think this was his first sit down since he was released.
Yes.
And I have to say, I was so scared. I'm like, what if he shares something? And you never know. You never
I
know
know,
with
because he had an interview with CBC News. I remember weeks before his first arrest, and they used that as, I think it was working with an enemy state or something along those lines, with the charges that the Iranian government handed down to him for just talking to a news outlet in Canada.
Yeah, so you can understand where my fear was coming from. But
100%.
but I think what he opened up is the fact that it's okay for you to talk about the trauma that was inflicted on you. He opened that door so other people can step forward, because oftentimes what we see with activists, they don't want to say what happened to them because they believe if they do expose, it's going to weaken who they are, but also it's not going to be, it's going to scare other people for wanting to step forward. But what he did is that you can be strong, you can be resilient, but these things also happen to you, and it's okay for you to talk about it, because we don't see so much coming from Iran. We don't have that much documentation coming of all the torture that is happening under the Islamic Republic. And I think that was the keynote in that conversation, that he allowed that to happen. And I was actually surprised, because that was supposed to be a shorter conversation between us. And when he did that, I'm like, oh, beautiful. Now there are other people who can start talking, and that healing can happen when we share those stories, right? Especially when you have the Islamic Republic, when there is little to none justice being achieved.
So relate to us. What did he tell you about the trauma that he experienced?
He spoke about solitary confinement, and what he said was, that stood out to me. He said that they found out that the place of vulnerability is my father, and they use that to torture me. And he said something in Farsi, which اعصابم خورد شد خاکشیر شد, meaning that my whole mental health was in shambles, because every 21 days he get to have one phone call with his dad, and he used to take the pen and he would make marks on his cast. They broke his leg, his nose, he went to terrible physical condition. And then when that day came, and imagine you don't have contact with anyone and you're looking forward to that conversation, they changed it. They're like, you're not going to get any phone call with your father. And that, to him, when he described it, that was the worst part of torture, because we have seen it often. They use family members because they know family members can really get them to break them and to dehumanize them. That's what the Islamic Republic want to know. They want them to know that you have no right as a human being for speaking up. So we're going to take all the rights and we are going to do it in the worst case possible.
Wow. That's very compelling and amazing that he was able to share that with you. Again, part of the healing process for not just him, but people like him. To conclude, is there anything you'd like to add to our conversation?
I think I would like to add that now that we have had this conversation with Toomaj, and we see Puran, Nazanin, and all the other activists bravely are standing up. They are saying it's okay for you to. It's okay for you to stand up, to believe in what you believe in, to set yourself free and help others. And I think that's kind of the lesson that we can all, not even people in Iran, everywhere, that it's okay for you to stand up for what you believe is right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's Azadeh Afsahi joining us on Eye for Iran.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You can sign up for a weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with top stories, key analysis, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, you can head to our dedicated English website at iranintl.com/en.